The desire for security versus life's uncertainty. Anxiety often stems from a fundamental paradox. The more desperately we chase security, the more insecure we feel. Philosopher Alan Watts observed that modern humans live in a state of constant tension because we refuse to accept life's inherent uncertainty. We cling to plans, routines, and control in hopes of guaranteeing a stable future, an impossible task in a world defined by change. The desire for security and the feeling of insecurity are the same thing, Watts famously wrote. In other words, by holding on too tightly, like holding our breath, we ironically create the very anxiety we're trying to avoid. The harder we try to predict and control every outcome, the more life's unpredictability frightens us. This futile resistance against reality, resisting the fact that everything is in constant transformation, including you, generates the mental tension we label as anxiety. Watts reminds us that life is impermanent and uncontrollable at its core. No amount of worry or planning can provide absolute certainty about the future. Yet instead of embracing this fact, we often live in our heads, oscillating between memories of the past and projections of the future. By doing so, we miss the only place life truly happens, the present moment. According to Watts, our inability to fully inhabit the present is a chief source of anxiety. We endlessly live forward, always bracing for the next problem, and thus never actually live now. This means we are absent from our own life as it unfolds, caught in a mental chase for an assurance that reality simply cannot give. The result is a continuous undercurrent of unease. The key insight is that anxiety is not a personal failing or a mind malfunction. It is a natural response to an impossible demand we place on ourselves. We demand certainty in an uncertain existence, and when reality doesn't comply, our mind and body react with stress. Rather than viewing anxiety as a defect, Watts suggests seeing it as a messenger, a sign that we are at odds with the flow of life. When we accept that life is entirely momentary and that seeking complete security is futile, we can begin to release this inner tension. In short, to feel some insecurity is simply to be alive. Anxiety becomes problematic only when we misunderstand it, when we treat the normal flux of life as something that must be controlled rather than flowed with. An ancestral stress response in a modern world. If our mind's refusal to let go creates psychological anxiety, our body plays an equally crucial role. Famed neuroscientist Robert Sapolsky, author of Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, illuminates how our stress response, an ancient biological system, is mismatched to the modern world. In the wild, animals like zebras experience stress only in short bursts, in the face of immediate physical dangers. For example, when a zebra is chased by a lion, its body unleashes a flood of stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol, that spike heart rate, blood pressure, and muscle readiness to fight or flee. This acute fight-or-flight response is highly adaptive. It can mean the difference between life and death. Crucially, once the real threat passes, say the zebra escapes the lion, its body quickly returns to baseline. The stress hormones dissipate, and the zebra relaxes. In Sapolsky's words, for non-humans, the stress response is a totally brilliant short-term solution to a short-term problem. Human beings, however, have turned this temporary alarm system into a chronic condition. Our brains do not wait for a lion to activate stress. We can trigger the same fight-or-flight reaction with mere thoughts and worries. Sapolsky notes that for humans, it takes far less than an immediate threat of death to turn on the stress response. A pending work deadline, a traffic jam, an unsettling email notification, all these modern predicaments can send our heart racing and our anxiety skyrocketing, even though they are not true life or death emergencies. We imagine future disasters and our bodies respond as if those dangers are clear and present. Unlike the zebra, we might lie awake at 3 a.m. with our heart pounding and muscles tense, even though we're perfectly safe in bed. In essence, our Stone Age biology is trying to navigate a digital era onslaught of social and psychological stressors it was never designed for. We live in an ancestral body that reacts to office meetings or financial worries as if they were predators on the savannah. The consequences of this chronic activation are severe. Our stress response evolved to be a temporary state. When it never shuts off, it starts to harm us from within. Sapolsky's research shows that long-term overexposure to stress hormones ravages the body and brain. Everything from metabolism to immunity is affected. Over time, chronic anxiety and stress contribute to a laundry list of health problems: cardiovascular disease, hypertension, suppressed immunity, digestive disorders, depression, sexual dysfunction, insomnia, and more. In one talk, Sapolsky flatly stated, "Basically every outpost in your body falls apart more readily if you're chronically stressed." We become, in effect, prisoners of an internal alarm system that is sounding nonstop. Many of the physical symptoms you might associate with anxiety, racing heart, shortness of breath, stomach knots, are actually your body's natural fight-or-flight mechanisms misfiring inappropriately. It's not that you are going crazy. Rather, your body is trying its best to protect you, but it doesn't realize that the predator it fears is actually an overactive mind. Understanding this biological root of anxiety is crucial for self-compassion. It shows that anxiety is not a weakness or character flaw. You aren't too sensitive or broken for feeling on edge. In fact, your reaction is the expected result of a brain that evolved to react swiftly to threats. The problem is that in today's world, the threats are everywhere and endless. Bills, news alerts, social pressures, and we rarely get the signal that the danger is over. Your brain and body, unable to distinguish an upcoming presentation from a prowling lion, remain stuck in high gear. As long as we ignore this reality, we risk blaming ourselves. Why can't I just relax? For what is essentially a natural physiological response gone awry due to modern circumstances. The modern paradox: control and insecurity. Modern culture often tells us that control is the path to happiness. From a young age, we're encouraged to plan our careers, manage our emotions, avoid mistakes, and generally keep our lives on a tight trajectory. Superficially, this seems wise. After all, who doesn't want to avoid chaos and failure? But as both Watts and Sapolsky indicate, this obsession with control can backfire spectacularly. Watts called our era an age of insecurity, masquerading as progress. We have more knowledge at our fingertips than ever, yet information overload often feeds our anxiety rather than quells it. We have countless choices in life, yet too many options can lead to paralysis and worry over whether we're making the right one. In striving to control every outcome, we create a constant fear of what happens if we lose control. It's a cruel paradox. The tighter we grip, the more things seem to slip through our fingers, fueling further panic. Anxiety, then, can be seen as the inevitable reflection of a life spent resisting uncertainty. It arises when we try to live as if nothing should ever go wrong, a futile stance in a dynamic, ever-changing world. We're taught to always be prepared and anticipate risks, but taken to an extreme, this mindset means we are always bracing for disaster. Instead of feeling secure, we become chronically fearful. Moreover, society often adds a layer of shame to mental health struggles. Feeling anxious is seen as something to fix or hide, a sign of personal failure or lack of resilience. This only worsens the problem. We end up anxious about being anxious, a double bind of fear and self-judgment. In reality, no one has it all under control. Life can throw curveballs, economic downturns, breakups, illness, global pandemics, that no amount of planning can prevent. By expecting ourselves to be invulnerable, we set an unachievable standard. Watts pointed out that we live like ghosts, trapped between a past that's gone and a future that never arrives, haunted by things that might happen. In doing so, we neglect the present, the one moment we actually can experience. Both philosophy and psychology concur that embracing uncertainty, acknowledging the limits of our control, is key to easing anxiety. When we stop seeing anxiety as a shameful defect and start seeing it as a signal, we can begin to respond more wisely. After all, if anxiety is telling us that something about our approach to life isn't working, Perhaps we should listen rather than just try to suppress the feeling. Anxiety as a messenger, not an enemy. What if we stopped waging war against our anxiety and instead asked what it's trying to tell us? This represents a profound mindset shift. Anxiety often surfaces when there's a disconnect between our inner needs and our external lives. It may be a legitimate cry of consciousness that something in our environment, behavior, or choices is out of alignment with our well-being. For example, remaining in an unhealthy relationship or an unfulfilling job can generate constant anxiety. Not because we're just anxious people, but because some part of us recognizes this situation isn't right. In this sense, anxiety is like a warning signal on a dashboard, indicating an underlying issue that needs attention. The feeling itself isn't the enemy, it's the messenger. Alan Watts noted that much of our psychological suffering comes from trying to be something we're not. We put on masks of being perfectly fine, or force ourselves into societal molds, even as our authentic self rebels underneath. Pretending to be invulnerable or always in control only creates friction within us. Watts pointed out that trying to sustain a rigid false identity, the always happy, always in control persona, is exhausting and ultimately impossible. The tension of that gap manifests as anxiety. In simpler terms, who we truly are and who we think we should be fall out of sync. Anxiety then prods us with discomfort, pushing us to confront that truth. It's as if your mind and body are saying, "Pay attention, something isn't right here." On the biological side, Sapolsky's work implies there is an intelligence to stress. In evolutionary terms, stress and anxiety evolved to protect us, to grab our attention. If we feel anxious before an important exam, it's our body-mind's way of urging us to prepare. If we feel anxious walking down a dark alley at night, it heightens our alertness to potential danger. These responses are adaptive in the right context. The problem is when they become generalized or chronic, when anxiety is always on, even in safe or mundane contexts. But even chronic anxiety might be pointing to unresolved issues, perhaps past traumas, unresolved grief, or pervasive lifestyle imbalance that we haven't addressed. Rather than simply label it a malfunction, we can ask, what unmet need or fear is this anxiety highlighting? By viewing anxiety as a teacher or messenger, we can approach it with curiosity instead of pure dread. This doesn't mean glorifying the suffering it brings, but recognizing that behind the discomfort is useful information. For instance, persistent anxiety about social situations might be telling us something about how we value others' approval over our own self-acceptance. Anxiety about the future might be highlighting our difficulty in trusting ourselves or life. When we listen to these messages, we can begin to make changes, perhaps setting healthier boundaries, seeking meaningful work, healing old wounds, or simply allowing ourselves to acknowledge fear. In this way, anxiety can lead to greater self-awareness. It forces us to pay attention to parts of our life we might otherwise ignore. As the saying goes, the only way out is through. Truly understanding our anxiety, sitting with it, decoding it, is the first step to moving beyond its paralyzing grip. Reconnecting with the present and the body. Both Watts' philosophy and Sapolsky's neuroscience converge on one practical solution. We must return to the present moment and reconnect with our body to break free from chronic anxiety. What does this mean in practice? It means shifting from incessant thinking to direct experience. Instead of mentally living in tomorrow's imagined disasters, we ground ourselves in here and now. The simplest entry point is often the breath. Deliberately slow, deep breathing is more than just a relaxation cliché. It has real physiological power. Taking steady breaths, especially exhaling slowly, activates the parasympathetic nervous system, our natural calm-down system. This sends a clear signal to the brain that you are safe and it's okay to stand down from high alert. In essence, deep breathing is like telling your anxious brain, "False alarm, you can rest now." Over time, practices like diaphragmatic breathing can even lower stress hormone levels and reduce the intensity of anxiety symptoms. It's a tool always available to us, and with regular practice it can dramatically interrupt the spiral of panic and racing thoughts. Besides breathing, physical movement and grounding actions are crucial. Anxiety often lives in the head as racing thoughts. Moving attention to the body can cut that cycle. Exercise is one of the most effective and scientifically proven anxiety busters. When you engage in moderate exercise, like brisk walking, jogging, or yoga, you help burn off excess adrenaline and cortisol that your body produced during stress. In fact, regular exercise has been shown to lower baseline cortisol levels, meaning it can make you less prone to anxiety spikes over time. Even a short walk or simply stretching and tensing relaxing muscle groups can release built-up physical tension. Sleep is another undervalued ally. In Sapolsky's view, getting sufficient rest is critical, since chronic stress can disrupt sleep, and lack of sleep in turn heightens anxiety, a vicious cycle. Prioritizing consistent quality sleep gives your nervous system a chance to reset. Another powerful antidote to anxiety is mindful presence, which essentially means observing your thoughts and feelings without immediately reacting. When an anxious thought arises, what if I fail? What if something bad happens? Instead of spiraling, you practice noticing it. There's my fear of failure showing up. This kind of mindful awareness, as taught in therapies like mindfulness-based stress reduction, has been shown to help reduce anxiety by breaking the identification with anxious thoughts. Watts would describe this as a form of surrender, not surrender in the sense of defeat, but in acceptance. You allow yourself to feel uncertainty or fear without letting it drive you into panic or futile control attempts. Paradoxically, when you fully face and accept the feeling of insecurity, it often begins to dissolve on its own. It's like unmasking a bully. Once confronted, it loses much of its power. By staying present with the bodily sensations of anxiety, the tight chest, the knots in the stomach, and breathing through them, you teach your brain that these feelings, while uncomfortable, are manageable. They come in waves and will pass. You learn that you are larger than your anxiety. It is a part of your experience, not the whole of you. In practical terms, reconnecting with the present can be as simple as engaging your senses. For example, many therapists recommend grounding exercises. Name 5 things you can see, 4 you can touch, 3 you can hear, and so on. This pulls you out of your whirlwind of thoughts into the reality of the moment. Engaging in meaningful, absorbing activities, what some call flow activities, like painting, cooking, or playing music, also anchors you in the now. Watts believed, the secret of life is to be completely engaged with what you are doing in the here and now. When you are fully engaged, anxiety finds little foothold, because anxiety lives in the elsewhere, the what-ifs and what-nexts. By training ourselves little by little to return to now, we give our minds and bodies a chance to finally rest from the endless chase. Over time, this practice of presence rebuilds a sense of basic trust, a trust that we can handle life as it comes moment by moment, without needing to preempt every unknown future. Steps to soothe an anxious mind and body. Deep breathing exercises. Practice slow, deep breaths with extended exhales. This activates your body's calming parasympathetic response and can lower acute anxiety symptoms. Even just a few minutes of focused breathing sends a "you are safe" signal to the brain. Physical activity. Engage in regular exercise or any movement you enjoy. Walking, dancing, yoga. Physical activity uses up stress hormones and helps lower baseline stress. Consistent exercise, about 30 minutes most days, has been shown to reduce cortisol levels and anxiety over time. Adequate sleep and rest. Prioritize sleep hygiene and ensure you get enough rest. A well-rested brain is far more resilient to stress. Lack of sleep not only increases anxiety, it also makes it harder to use your other coping skills. Mindful grounding. When anxiety hits, ground yourself in the present. For example, notice the sensation of your feet on the floor or focus on the breath moving in and out. Remind yourself that in this very moment, you are okay. Observing the anxious feelings without judgment can prevent you from getting carried away by them. Connect with others. Don't underestimate the power of social support. Talking to a trusted friend, family member, or therapist about what you're feeling can provide relief. Human connection releases hormones, like oxytocin, that naturally counter stress. Feeling understood and supported tells your nervous system that you are not alone in facing life's challenges. Meaningful breaks. Give your mind permission to take breaks. Engage in activities that genuinely relax or fulfill you, whether that's reading, spending time in nature, meditation, or creative hobbies. Regular pauses in the day disrupt the chronic stress cycle and remind you that life is more than an endless to-do list. These steps are not quick fixes or one-time tricks. Rather, they are part of an ongoing practice of self-care and awareness. Over time, they help retrain your mind and body to remember what safety and presence feel like. As Sapolsky's research implies, we can't eliminate all modern stress, but we can teach our body how to recover and reset, much like that zebra on the savannah that shakes off the stress once the chase is over. And as Watts's philosophy teaches, we can learn to stop adding unnecessary mental stress by embracing the truth of uncertainty instead of fighting it. Re-examining anxiety through these lenses, we arrive at a liberating understanding. Anxiety is not a flaw in you. It is a feature of being human. In a very real sense, your anxiety reflects that you are alive, aware, and sensitive to the world. Feeling anxious doesn't mean you are broken. Often it means you are perceiving truths that need addressing. It is entirely logical to feel anxious in a society that often encourages disconnection from self, constant comparison with others, and denial of our natural limits. If anything, your anxiety might reveal your clarity, your inner wisdom signaling that something about the status quo isn't quite right. As Alan Watts noted, many of us try to fix the external world, chasing achievement, status, material comfort, hoping it will cure our inner turmoil, when in fact, we must also turn inward and face ourselves. Anxiety, uncomfortable as it is, nudges us toward that inner work. It invites us to ask, what have I been avoiding? What is not aligned in my life? Where am I resisting the flow of reality? These questions can lead to profound personal growth. Both Watts and Sapolsky ultimately offer a message of empowerment wrapped in realism. From Watts's perspective, the moment we stop insisting that life obey our expectations, we begin to actually live. When we surrender to the present, saying yes to reality as it is, we liberate ourselves from the constant fear of what might be. This doesn't mean resigning ourselves to fate or never planning. It means planning and living without the attachment that everything must go exactly as envisioned. We learn to surf the waves of change rather than trying to flatten the ocean. Sapolsky's work, on the other hand, reminds us that we have tools to help our physiology adapt. We might not rid the world of stress, but we can build resilience by understanding our bodies and giving them what they need: rest, movement, connection. We can compassionately forgive ourselves for getting anxious, recognizing that it's as natural as an immune response, and like an immune response, it can sometimes overreact. In embracing these lessons, anxiety transforms from a terrifying enemy into a cautious friend, one that warns us, but doesn't have to control us. Instead of a cycle of fear and guilt, I'm afraid and I feel bad for feeling afraid, we can enter a cycle of awareness and clarity. I'm feeling anxious. Let me explore why and what I need. Over time, this stance builds true inner security, not the impossible security of never encountering change or hardship, but the real confidence that whatever comes, we have the presence of mind and strength of body to face it. Ironically, the surest way to feel secure is to stop frantically searching for absolute security. Life will always have unknowns, but when we make peace with insecurity, the stranglehold of chronic anxiety loosens. In summary, anxiety is a multifaceted phenomenon, part philosophical, born of our refusal to live now, part biological, an ancient stress response in a new world. By understanding both aspects, we gain a more holistic mastery over it. We learn when to gently quiet the mind, when to care for the body, and when to heed anxiety's message that something needs changing. This journey is ongoing, a continuous practice of coming back to reality and to ourselves. It may not always be easy, but it leads to a life lived more fully and honestly. Instead of merely surviving under the shadow of anxious fear, we start thriving, with anxiety serving as a guidepost toward what truly matters, living authentically, here and now. As you move forward, remember that every wave of anxiety is an opportunity to practice presence and self-understanding. Little by little, you can reclaim the freedom of not needing to have every answer secured in advance. In that freedom lies the peace of mind we were looking for all along. Ultimately, the path to healing anxiety is not about escaping uncertainty, but about learning to find stability within uncertainty. By listening to your anxiety's message and responding with clarity, not panic, you won't see your anxiety as an all-powerful enemy ever again. Instead, you'll recognize it as a part of you, one that can be understood, managed, and even befriended on the journey to a more peaceful and present life.